everybody. Welcome back to the Science Dispatch podcast. Cameron English with you again, joined as always by Dr. Chuck Dinnerstein, Director of Medicine at the American Council on Science and Health. Chuck, you're doing a little jig over there. You in a good mood?
I'm very good mood. Very happy person. Spring has sprung.
I love it. Spring has sprung. It's beautiful. The sun's out, but it's not sweltering yet, so it's a good time to be alive.
Exactly.
We have an amusing article today by our colleague, Dr. Josh Bloom, Director of Pharmaceutical Sciences here at ACSH. This is from early March 2025, and this is a new theme. It's not a new theme, but it's a much more popular theme in science media these days, Chuck, of just RFK bashing, I think is what we're going to call it, where all you do is you take a tiny bit of information about Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and then you could go either way on it, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but then you surround that specific claim with like 800 words of speculation.
Yes.
And then you go, this Kennedy guy is Satan himself, which, maybe that's true in some cases, but this is an interesting example of it. And to Josh's credit, he's actually making an accurate statement here about some of the things Kennedy has said. So this is called The Astounding Irony of RFK's Vitamin A Stance. So here's the introduction, and then Chuck, jump in here. So Josh writes, lost in the conversation about measles and vitamin A is the mind-boggling irony of RFK Jr.'s position on using the vitamin. He promotes it as a measles treatment where it is useless, while condemning millions of children to blindness and death by opposing GM foods like golden rice, a clear solution to vitamin A deficiency in poor countries. It's almost impossible to be more wrong than this. Okay, let's back up a little bit, Chuck. Maybe for the uninitiated, they don't know what golden rice is. They've heard this of this guy Kennedy. They've seen him talking about worms in his brain and so forth. Maybe you could just lay the groundwork for someone so they understand what we're talking about.
Okay, so let me try it from the point of view of vitamin A deficiency. And vitamin A is an essential nutrient. We do not have a sufficient quantity on our own, and we have to ingest it. And there's any number of ways to do that. Because of the abundance of food in the United States, vitamin A deficiency is a very rare disease. Approximately 1% of the population may have a vitamin A deficiency, and these are primarily people that have irritable bowel disease and have difficulties absorbing the vitamin A from the nutrients, or they're neonates that have similar kinds of issues. But it is not a significant issue in the U.S. On the other hand, in what is described as low-income and middle-income countries, especially in Asia, where rice is the staple cereal, and I may be using cereal in the wrong term purely scientifically, but where rice is the staple food source, vitamin A deficiency is a significant problem. And globally, they say that there's about 190 million school-aged children that are at risk for a disease called xerophthalmia, which is basically a form of blindness that develops from vitamin A deficiency and is one of the leading causes of blindness in these countries. So that's the background of vitamin A. When you talk about measles also happens to travel a lot in low-income and middle-income countries because of lack of vaccination and other public health measures. And what they have found in those countries is that children that have been hospitalized for measles seem to improve when they're given supplemental vitamin A. And so when Secretary Kennedy said that there was evidence that vitamin K was helpful in treating measles, he was, in fact, correct if he was talking about a child in Bangladesh. But if you're talking about a child in the United States, that's probably not the case. So they've tried multiple things in order to increase vitamin A availability.
Can I interrupt you for
Asia.
just a sec?
Sure.
Just a clarifying question, because my understanding, which could totally be wrong, is that if you are vitamin A deficient, you're at a greater risk for a severe measles infection. But if your vitamin A levels are at where they should be, for whatever age you happen to fall in, that's not going to stop you from getting
No.
measles,
No,
which I think was one of his claims. Is that
Right. No.
Okay.
Vitamin A impairs your immune response.
Okay. Okay.
But sufficient vitamin A does not protect you from measles.
Okay.
Unless you're in part of the garlic vampire crowd.
Okay.
We don't
Sorry
have
to
a lot-
interrupt.
We don't have a lot. That's okay. We don't have a lot of those nutrients and herbs that will keep those things away. One of the solutions that they came to for vitamin A supplements in Asia was to develop a rice, because that is the staple food. It's available to everyone. That could produce beta carotene, which is the precursor for vitamin A. And they did that by doing genetic modification. And Secretary Kennedy has been a longstanding foe of genetic modification because he's fearful of the consequences of introducing, air quotes, foreign DNA into plants. And that, I think, is what Josh was trying to get to in talking about his paradoxical views of things. So, in a sense, this will be a stretch, but I think it's going to be true. Secretary Kennedy remains very consistent. If you think of vitamin A in golden rice as a public health measure, he also is not that happy about fluoride in the drinking water, another public health measure, and probably equally as safe. How's that for a thought?
I like it. That I guess it's what we've come to expect from him, even if it is, in the abstract, shamelessly hypocritical.
There's another way. One more thought. There's another way in which it's paradoxical, because if you think about Secretary Kennedy's very concerned about the effect of diet on our chronic illnesses, and they're obviously going to be targeting ultra-processed foods. But if you think of golden rice and you subject it to the NOVA classification, which is this classification of how processed a food is, it's a category 1. It's unprocessed. You harvest it and then you eat it. It has no supplements in it. It has no additives in it. It's as natural in that classification of things as anything can be.
Yeah. And well, to add a little layer of amusement to that, the rice plant naturally produces beta carotene in its leaves. The trick was getting it into the endosperm, the rice grain that you actually eat, right?
Yeah.
So you're not even aside from the fact that the nucleic acids in plants are the same in our cells, right?
Right. It introduced, all the genetic modification did is it introduced a bacterial enzyme that could convert the beta carotene into vitamin A. It's available in other plants that we eat. There's never been any evidence that eating DNA will result in you replicating things. So there's not a lot. It's the usual. There's not a lot of great scientific evidence there. And I think, Josh's ultimate point is that while there may be some nuance to the discussion, Secretary Kennedy seems to be missing the nuance on this point, because he may not be as scientifically, here come the air quotes again, literate as other individuals, which should not be surprising. He's an attorney. He did not train as a scientist.
It's not that lawyers are stupid. It's more that they look at the accurate information and they just go, nah, I'm going to go here.
I'm sure, fortunately for you, you've never spent any time in court. And I have spent some time in court on either side of the table in terms of defense or prosecution, plaintiff or defendant. And I would have to say that the attorneys are very concerned with words. That's the key to the system, what the words mean. And so these little ways that we parse the sentences are very different oftentimes from the attorneys. I mean, I can remember once I was acting as an expert witness, and they asked me a question, and I gave what I thought was a standard answer to, and at which point the attorneys from both sides jumped up and shook their heads and ran up to the table, and they had to have a side discussion to decide what to do with that particular line. And I still have no idea what was wrong with what I said, but they were both upset with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for most educated people, words mean what they mean. And then for lawyers, words mean what other lawyers in the past say they mean.
Again, and I'm sure I've said this before, talk is cheap until you hire an attorney.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the art of high level bullshit is what it is. And I've already been lectured by one attorney for summarizing the profession in such a way. But nevertheless, I think it's important here because of what's going on. You know, one thing that has been I don't know if minimized or dismissed. I don't know which of those is the best way to put it. But Kennedy said in the Fox News op-ed that he wrote right up top that you should vaccinate your kid against measles. Now, what people have focused on is that, well, that's cynical. He doesn't want to come into the job and have a measles outbreak be the thing that tags his legacy. Now, let's just say that's true. Let's say he's cynical and he doesn't really care and he thinks the vaccine's bad, but he's going to say that to protect his own ass. I'm still okay with that. If he comes up and you have the biggest anti-vaxxer in history come into a job and go, you need to get this vaccine. You know, I think that's actually a good thing. No, whatever his motives may be and however much I dislike him, the fact that he knew that he had to come in and say that, you know, and his followers, a lot of them were like breaking out in hives at
Right. You know, there's everybody's hair is on fire. Some for justifiable reasons, others not. And, you know, part of the argument that I heard about that op-ed is he didn't say it vociferously enough. He wasn't adamant in the way he said it. So it's not even so much the words, but it's the context and the tone. And it's hard to assess tone from the writing in which he said it to complain. And, you know, we talked about this in the pre-game show.
Right.
On this, but I'm willing not so much to give him completely the benefit of the doubt, but I'm willing for him to do something before I begin to worry about what it means, because they've done very little so far. They've and maybe this will get me in further trouble. Who knows? There is underlying a lot of this a kernel of truth. And you know, if you're going to be a little bit balanced about it, it's worth pointing that out. With the vitamin A. Vitamin A is a useful adjunct in treating measles if you're in Bangladesh. There's the kernel of truth that he carried it on to talk about here. Whole different meaning. And I think that from what I've been reading about the outbreak in Texas, there's a lot of information about that outbreak that's not making it into the mainstream because it's not part of anybody's narrative.
And what is that information?
Two interesting facts. One, this occurred primarily in a Mennonite community. And so, you know, we have a lot of good evidence that these ultra-religious communities, the Mennonites, the Hasidic Jews, have all been very adamant about not getting vaccinated and have all been niduses of measles outbreak, New York, Ohio, and now in Texas. That was an interesting fact. And then the other interesting fact that rarely made it was that this particular Mennonite community had originally been in Mexico. And, I love this, is my favorite part, they illegally immigrated to the United States 20 years ago.
I love it. I love it.
What do you do with that?
Well, there's so much going on here that's funny because what I've come to realize over the last 5 years, and we don't always have to agree on everything to recognize this, is that big science, team science, the mainstream of the science community, they have their own struggle sessions, they have their own acceptable beliefs, they have their own hierarchy of cool kids. And there's certain things you're allowed to say, and there's certain things you're not. And so, if you were to come out as a vaccinologist or whatever, and say, well, what's really going on here is that these people came here illegally. They're from an Amish adjacent community that's skeptical of technology and medicine. And, we really can't blame this on Kennedy much as we would like to, right? That's not going to win you friends. You're not going to get a lot of likes on science Twitter. You're just going to get barked at. So you're the first person I've heard actually bring this up in this context, which I think is funny.
And these people have been here for 20 years illegally, and this is the killer. They don't look like what you would think of as a Mexican because they're Caucasian.
Right. So nobody. Okay.
Your head explodes if you have to go with identity politics. Your head has to explode.
Right. This has to fit in my narrative, Dr. Chuck, and you're screwing with it, and so I'm just going to ignore it. It's fascinating stuff. One other thing as we wrap up that I think is worth discussing. During the pandemic, for all of Donald Trump's faults, his administration did a really good job of streamlining the authorization process at FDA to get that vaccine out.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that he is personally an expert on messenger RNA or that he loves vaccines. But what I think it means is he had people around him that said we need to adjust these aspects of the clinical trials and the administrative process to get these online. And that happened. But the way that a lot of people in science dealt with that was to say, well, that was just incidental, right? Right. We have these brilliant scientists at FDA, and we have these brilliant, innovative companies, and right. Trump just happened to be there, right? So even when something good happened on his watch, it was beyond the pale to give him any significant credit, and that's what I think might happen here too. Is that if disaster does not befall the United States under Kennedy's watch, it will be in spite of him, right? Despite all of his efforts to burn the world down, we didn't let him. Thank you, Team Science.
So that very well may be part of the story that is told. On the other hand, President Trump has not really embraced the fact of Operation Warp Speed since he left office the first time. So there's more at work on both sides of the aisle in terms of how they wish to shape history. I guess because if the victors write history, we're not quite sure yet which of the victors is going to be.
Are you implying that a politician might say certain things to appeal to his base? Are you going out on that limb?
Yes, I'm going to. Okay. Today, make a little plaque. Yes, I'm going to go out on a limb. Sometimes they're not speaking on behalf of our interests as much as theirs.
Wow. Okay. How dare you?
As I know. This is not even a political science program, so I'm going to be hearing about
it. Yeah, someone's going to write an angry email. Oh, well. Okay. Well, once again, Josh's article is called The Astounding Irony of RFK's Vitamin A Stance. There's a good science lesson in here, and there's a good lesson in critical thinking for everybody. It may not apply exactly as everyone would like it to, but I think it's still interesting. So go check out this article. It's on acsh.org. When you're there, click the subscribe tab, punch in your email address. We'll send you the stories that we publish. The ones that you read are the ones we usually talk about. And when you show up for this podcast, you'll know what we're talking about too. So it's a deal for everybody. Follow us on social. It's at ACSH.org. I'm at CamJEnglish. Chuck responds to emails, so shoot us an email if you have a question, and he will typically get back to you within 4 to 6 business days or whenever he can. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you all next time.